Festwochen Podcast mit Clarissa Stadler und Nada El-Azar. Die Wiener Festwochen danken ihren Hauptsponsoren Erste Bank und Wiener Städtische.
Welcome to another edition of the Wiener Festwochen podcast. I am Clarissa Stadler and my guest today is Begüm Erciyas, whose performance Letters from Attica is currently on show at the festival.
Hello.
Hi Begüm, welcome. How are you doing so far in Vienna since you arrived?
It has been very busy so far because the performance is happening at different locations. So I have been going to the different locations and seeing how to set up the situation.
Last night I had the chance to participate at one of your sessions in the public space, precisely in the 12. Februar Park, right in front of Karl-Marx-Hof. We were a group of people lined up in front of a wall of the legendary Gemeindebau, standing at a distance of 2 meters and passing on short spoken messages to one another. This sounds a bit strange, but I have to admit it was really very intense. Maybe we can talk about this so-called social installation. Before I describe my experience, can you maybe give us some information about the background of this work?
Yes, I made the work during the first lockdown last year in 2020 in the summer. It was supposed to it was a commission, and it was supposed to be a piece that happens in public space and works with the measures that were currently in place. And since it was a moment where we could not gather or frontal performance situations were not possible, I had the idea that maybe then we do this line and we just pass on the performance to each other. And also very soon I discovered the letters of Sam Melville that he wrote in prison during between 69 and 71, up to the famous Attica uprising. He was in Attica prison. In 71 there was the prison uprising that, among others, also Sam Melville was organizing. And during this uprising he was shot and he died.
So how did you find these letters? And maybe we can talk about Sam Melville. Who was this man? He was a bomb setter. During 68, 69 in New York, he set about 9 bombs to sabotage public property in protest of the Vietnam War and American imperialism and capitalism. But there were also other reasons like... So he was imprisoned for political reasons, right?
Absolutely, yes. Mm-hmm. Nobody died in these bomb attacks, so he had developed this very precise procedure that he would set the bomb in the night, he would call the security guard before setting the bomb, so everybody would know that this happens. And he would be the one also devising the bombs. He had a team, a few people around him who would be his accomplices in these acts.
So he was a revolutionary, so to say.
Indeed, he definitely saw himself as a revolutionary. He was very unhappy about the way society was working, was functioning. And also the corporate powers rising.
But of course he was also extremist, and let's say that, because as soon as you lay bombs, you are an extremist. Okay, so Sam Melville, how did you find his letters? Are they published anywhere?
They are published, yes. They are published in a book. I had read a part of his letters is used in a very famous music piece. So I knew that music piece, but I had never read the whole of the letters. So I ordered it from a second-hand bookshop in New York. Actually, it's very hard to find because it was published once in 75.
Yeah, I imagine.
And then, I mean, it's very nice, his tone, the way he writes. Also, many things that he wrote back then somehow related to my situation in lockdown. This feeling of isolation, loneliness, but also this increasing will for political action, that we have to do something, we have to change something together. This is not how a society should be. I mean, how this isolation also created more and more political determination. I was also seeing around me in that period. So I thought it's a good text because it is not, it is about another situation, another time, another place. And yet in some way you can you connect to it more now than ever before. And also I like the format of the letters, that it is a format of where personal addressee from one person to the other. And yet they are published, so in the end it's also for many. And I thought the format of letters is a good format to speak one person to the other, especially because every letter starts with dear, ends with love, I love you.
Yes, I must say it is the ideal format for such a performance, and I must say it was really very, very intense. I went there, I didn't expect anything when I went there last night, but I must say it was really a very intense experience. Right from the start, I had goosebumps because it was so funny. I was standing in this line, 2 meters in front of me, a young guy, and the other 2 meters distance, a young woman. But the situation was really very special because a complete stranger next to me, the young guy, spoke parts of a love letter to me, a very intimate text that somebody else had written to somebody else, and instantly this guy, very dramatic also, spoke these lines to me, and I must say it's intense because as you said, in the moment you are the addressee of somebody else's intimate text.
Indeed, yes. In that moment you're at once passing on a document, like a text of somebody else from another time. It's really a documentary, it's literary text. On the other hand, you're embodying the text as if you mean it for somebody else.
Yes, and it's also somewhat conspirative because everybody was speaking rather on a low voice, not so loud, like it was a secret.
Yeah.
So it's like the whole line, it's like a conspiracy line.
Yeah.
And it's very special also.
Yeah, I think that's also how it looks from a distance a bit. Everybody's like, what are they doing?
It was funny because there were 2 guys passing by, obviously inhabitants of Karl Marxhof, funny guys with a beer in the one hand and a kebab in the other, and they passed by very closely and asked, "What are you doing here? It looks so strange." And then when they were explained, they said, "Oh, okay, we understand. Everybody pays a lot of money just to play Stille Post." But it looks like Stille Post, but it's much more than Stille Post. I was wondering then, why transmitting a message orally is so different from texting? Maybe do you have an explanation?
Why is it so different to speak the text instead of?
Why is it so different to speak parts of a letter to someone than texting it or reading it or writing? The oral transmission is so different, but why?
I think there's something about the singularity of the voice and the singularity of the person speaking. Especially in this situation, we don't change place. You are always left with this one person transmitting the text to you, and you understand that this is this one person that it's special, it's unreproducible, it is specific in how shy the person is, how active the person, I don't know, how, the embarrassment, the giggling, or the self-confidence, I don't know. There are so many different people doing it very differently with very different voices. And I think, for me, this has been important for my work in the last years also has been the relationship to one's own voice or to another voice, but the politics of the singularity of each voice.
So, what is the special thing about one's own voice? Because you did quite a lot of research about the human voice, I understand.
Exactly, and there's something with one's own voice. I think that, first of all, everybody hates their own voice. That's something already. But then there's also, once you start listening to your own voice, you also start understanding it's usually how empathy works is you look at somebody else and you think she's a bit like me. I see myself in her to a certain degree. And what I find interesting is the opposite procedure of hearing your own voice and thinking, there's a stranger inside of me. Or there are different parts inside of me, that it's not identity that is full, complete. But there's this unknown, this uncanny, uncomfortable part within my voice or inside,
What I really find interesting is that we are living in a time, everybody, when you go on the tube, for example, or a Straßenbahn or a train, everybody's only texting, reading and texting. Everything is very silent. Our time has become really very silent. And I think that using the human voice has become a revolutionary process in the meantime.
Especially in this last year, I think our relationship to voice and to media has been transforming a lot, because we have been really left alone and hearing each other's voice through these distorted channels or through messages or to Zoom. So in this very moment, I find it is very precious to hear each other's actual voice.
And I think it's interesting that you found out that especially in isolation, one's own voice becomes even more important, because it's the only thing you have. And maybe this is why this performance is so intense, because you realize that when you are imprisoned, and last year was an imprisonment, so to say, for some people at least, people who live without families, they were really imprisoned for almost a year. And the own voice gets really spooky, because you're alone with your own voice. So this is why it's so interesting to discover the voice again after this spooky, strange year.
It's true. I had days where I didn't speak at all. And then you feel, when you are on the phone, you feel the resistance also, that the voice comes a bit like squishy and unrecognizable almost. But in this piece, I think there is this relation between you and your neighbors on the two sides. But then there's still a sense of responsibility for the whole group, even if you don't see the whole group, because the line turns around corners. So you never know who is around the corner and how long does the line still go.
Yes.
But what is different in this piece, as opposed to other pieces I have done so far, is still there is this sense of togetherness. Even if you are not together, you don't see each other and you don't know who is the other.
What I also find interesting is that it shows the importance of a letter, because even if everything disappears, a letter stays. And it will always survive, and also the emotions will stay. And that maybe was so intense when you repeated this. Sometimes it's only parts of the letter, only one line, only one word even. And when you repeat this, it's like you become a small piece, like an atom of human mankind. Because you are the transmitter of something that was written long, long ago, but it is part of another life.
Indeed, yeah. you play a bit this double role indeed of, I mean, on one hand, it's written text that you're passing on the other hand, it's oral text as well.
Begüm, how did you become a performance artist? Because in the beginning, you were born in Ankara, and you did something completely different. You followed studies of, I think, molecular biology or something like that. So how does someone who is a student of biology become an artist of performance?
I think I was just lucky. During university, we had an amateur dance society, but everybody was very passionate about arts. So there were architecture students, sociology students, engineers, part of the group. So we were reading a lot, trying very experimental projects among ourselves.
So that must have been in the 90s, right? Or in the late 90s, or maybe
beginning of 2000s.
Beginning of 2000s.
So, and then somehow by chance I did this audition for SEED, for Salzburg Experimental Academy of Dance in Salzburg, which I was accepted to. I finished my studies in genetics and I thought, okay, instead of moving on to a PhD and knowing how academic...
but what a shift, I mean, from the studies in Turkey of genetics to switch to Salzburg.
I know. I mean, I thought it will be just a year of a break to have done something else before going on the academic career.
But then it was a complete life change.
Yeah, it was so beautiful. It's so. I mean, I also never enjoyed really the practice of working in a laboratory. And then it is very different to work with people. To work, I mean, a dance study is something. It's just amazing to study dance. And then while studying dance, I also immediately started doing my own work. Actually, that was not really dance in the end. But I had space and time and studios and presentation options and people ready to work with me. So it was just...
you were really lucky.
I was
also
really lucky somehow, yes.
Yeah. And you travel a lot, but you live in Brussels, is that correct?
Indeed.
Okay. So how long will you stay in Vienna? Because as I heard, you are preparing another project for Wiener Festwochen. Into the woods. Into the woods. Into the. I mean, that's my title. It's not called Into the Woods, but I say it will.
It's a good
you will
title,
go into the woods.
I'm preparing this at the moment. This will become in September. We will do open process with some participants from Vienna to go into the different woods. As I said, I have been always interested in this relationship between loneliness, solitude, and togetherness. And now more and more I'm interested in finding different formats of togetherness and a little bit also the question inclusivity, exclusivity, who's excluded, positionality of the members.
But forests are also symbols for retreats, no? So this it's like you're maybe repeating this isolation theme.
As a group, yes. Indeed.
Yes, exactly. Being isolated, but as a group.
Indeed. So there's another relationship indeed to go to a remote place in a forest where you can be alone as a group, where not even anybody from the festival is there to welcome you, and where you have a sound track prepared that you start together by counting 1, 2, 3, play. And
so people can apply for this, let's call it experiment, but what can they expect when they are chosen for the group?
What we will do is we will meet at different forests around Vienna at different times of the days. And we will do different listening sessions, actually. So we will listen to very different kinds of audio material together, alone. I mean, through headphones.
Yeah.
So what also headphones does is it separates people in a certain way, but the knowledge that we are all listening to the same material also brings us together, independent of if we see each other or if we don't see each other. So this is what we are going to work with a little bit in how distant we are from each other, if we are seeing how we are as a group physically in the forest, and what kind of audio material we are listening to, what kind of audio architecture, and what kind of socialness this audio material is creating. Also in relation to the space that we are in. Maybe you don't see the people, but you have all the trees around you. So
it's funny because I just have this idea. There is a piece, a theater piece that's called Geschichten aus dem Wiener Wald. So this is maybe a new version of Geschichten aus dem Wiener Wald, because the Wiener Wald is obviously the biggest forest around Vienna. So this sounds really exciting. Looking forward to this. But now we concentrate on your upcoming performances of Letters of Attica. I thank you very much for coming today to our studio. And let me just say the dates of the upcoming performances of Letters from Attica. It's from the 16th to the 20th of June on different places in the public space in Vienna. So I hope that many people can see it because it's really interesting. Thank you, Begüm.
Thank you.
Das war der Festwochen-Podcast. Wir verabschieden uns aus dem Studio Wunderbar. Die Signation stammt von Ursula Winterauer. Danke fürs Zuhören und bis zum nächsten Mal.